The first victims. In the black phone that we follow Finney, a quiet boy who is already dealing with enough problems at home, but everything gets worse when he is kidnapped by a criminal known as the Grabber. He wakes up in an isolated basement with no contact with the outside world, just an old phone hanging on the wall, clearly disconnected. The situation is already desperate, but it gets even stranger when the phone starts ringing. And there's no one alive on the other end. They are the voices of boys who were there before and didn't make it out. But instead of bringing more fear, those voices do the opposite. They help.
Don't go upstairs.
Why not?
It's a trap.
Each one shares mistakes, escape attempts, and details that could make a difference in his escape. And this is where the movie flips. What seemed like just another supernatural threat becomes Finney's only real advantage. The spirits are not there for revenge, but to make sure that someone finally manages to escape that monster. The movie is based on a short story by Joe Hill, son of Stephen King, and that explains a lot about the tone of the story.
This face?
Ignored signs. In The Messengers, we follow the Solomon family who move to an isolated farm trying to start over. The ones who feel the strange atmosphere the most are the children, Jess and Ben, who start seeing disturbing figures around the house. The problem? No one believes them. Meanwhile, strange things keep piling up and Jess insists that something is wrong. But the parents ignore everything, thinking it's just imagination or stress. And that's when another important character comes in. John, a worker hired by the father to help on the farm. He seems calm until he doesn't. Over time, Jess discovers clues about the family who used to live there. A mother and her children who died under mysterious circumstances. And then everything starts to make sense. The figures she sees are not trying to hurt anyone. They are trying to warn them. The real danger was never the spirits, but the man who is very much alive inside the house. When the truth comes out, it becomes clear that those apparitions were trying to stop history from repeating itself. Invisible weight. In Shudder, Toon is a photographer who starts noticing bizarre things after a car accident with his girlfriend. From that point on, developed photos start revealing figures that weren't there when the picture was taken. And of course, everything points to a supernatural presence. At first, it seems like the classic pattern, a vengeful spirit haunting the protagonist. But as the story moves forward, the reason behind it starts to appear, and it's not comfortable at all. Toon and his friends are hiding something from the past, something involving a girl named Natra, who had a relationship with him back in college. Little by little, the movie reveals that Natra was the victim of something serious, encouraged by the group of friends themselves. Toon wasn't the worst one, but he also did nothing to stop it. And that silence comes at a cost. The entity haunting him is not there by chance. There is a price to pay. And then comes the most disturbing detail. The constant pain in his neck that he feels throughout the movie has a reason. When Toon finally takes a picture of himself, he discovers Natra is literally on top of him the whole time. It's not just a presence, it's a real weight he carries. This invisible weight detail became one of the most iconic images in Asian horror. Mr. Babadook. In The Babadook, the story follows Amelia, a single mother who has never managed to get over the death of her husband, who died on the very day she was on her way to give birth to their son, Samuel. Years later, she lives exhausted, trying to take care of a child while dealing with grief that was never resolved. Her routine is already heavy until a strange book appears. The book called Mr. Babadook tells the story of a dark creature that, once you become aware of it, simply won't leave. At first, it seems like just a scary story, but things quickly get out of control. Samuel starts to believe the Babadook is real, and his behavior becomes more and more intense. Amelia, already at her limit, begins to notice signs that maybe this isn't just imagination. The presence of the Babadook grows little by little. It appears in the shadows in the corners of the house, and the feeling of invasion is constant. But the movie never treats the creature as a typical villain. On the contrary, the more the story unfolds, the clearer it becomes that the Babadook is a manifestation of Amelia's own emotional state. It represents grief, guilt, and everything she tried to ignore for years, and that completely changes the interpretation. The monster is not there to destroy, but as a consequence of something that was suppressed for too long. The director built the movie almost like a continuous metaphor for grief, so much so that the Babadook is never truly defeated. The idea is not to eliminate the problem, but to learn how to live with it. Before we continue, and if you enjoy the videos on the channel, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. It really helps us a lot. Let's keep going. Living Nightmare. In Before I Wake, we follow Cody, an orphan boy who is adopted by a couple, Jesse and Mark, who are still trying to deal with the loss of their own child. At first, Cody seems like just a quiet kid, but soon they notice something strange. Everything he dreams starts to appear in the real world, and it's not just bad things. Sometimes butterflies appear, beautiful images, even a version of the couple's deceased son shows up. That's when they start seeing it as a gift. But this gift comes with a serious problem. When Cody has nightmares, everything changes completely. A terrifying entity known as the Canker Man appears, starting to roam the house and put everyone at risk. At first, it seems like just another classic monster, something evil that needs to be stopped. But as Jesse investigates the boy's past, the truth begins to come out. Cody lost his mother at a very young age, a victim of a serious illness. Without fully understanding what was happening, he created in his own mind a distorted version of that memory. The Canker Man is not a villain. It is his fear taking shape, and that changes everything. The creature is not there out of malice, but as a manifestation of the pain and confusion of a child who could not process grief. Here, the scare takes a back seat. What really hits is the meaning behind the monster: trapped goddess. In Apostle, we follow Thomas Richardson, a man with a complicated religious past who decides to travel to an island after his sister is kidnapped by a cult. The place already feels strange, isolated, full of strict rules, and led by a man named Malcolm, who keeps everyone under control with a speech about faith and survival. The usual, right? The promise is simple. The island only prospers thanks to a divine entity they worship. At first, everything points to this goddess as the main danger. After all, the rituals are intense, involving sacrifices and a disturbing level of devotion. Thomas enters undercover trying to find his sister and understand what is really happening there. But the more he investigates, the more he realizes something is very wrong. The big twist happens when he finally finds the entity. Instead of a free evil force, he discovers that she is trapped, weakened, and being exploited by the cult itself. The goddess is not controlling anyone. She is being used. The group is basically extracting her power by force to keep the island functioning and maintain authority over others. This completely changes the interpretation of the movie. What seemed like the center of evil is actually just another victim within that system. The real threat comes from the people manipulating everything in the name of faith. The statue. In Oddity, the story revolves around Darcy, a blind woman with psychic abilities who decides to investigate the death of her own twin sister, Danny. The case is already strange on its own, but it becomes even more suspicious when Darcy decides to go to the house where everything happened, now occupied by Ted, the widower. Her presence already causes discomfort, but what really stands out is the object she brings with her, a wooden statue. From the moment the statue appears, the atmosphere changes. It's always there, standing in the background of scenes, almost as if it's watching, and as expected, everything suggests that it will cause problems. But the movie plays with that expectation. Instead of being a direct threat, the statue has a different role. As Darcy investigates deeper, she starts connecting dots that no one had connected before. Her sister's death was not an accident. There is direct involvement from people close to her, and everything points to Ted. The statue ends up becoming a kind of instrument to reveal the truth and act against those who are truly guilty. And then comes the twist. What seemed like the monster of the story is actually not there to cause harm, but to carry out a kind of justice. Oddity follows a more restrained type of horror, focusing much more on atmosphere and tension than on constant jump scares. Controlled Horseman. In Sleepy Hollow, directed by Tim Burton, the story follows Ichabod Crane, an investigator sent to a small village where a series of murders is happening in a very specific way. All the victims are found without their heads. The local legend points directly to the Headless Horseman, a supernatural figure that roams the area. Ichabod, being skeptical, tries to find a logical explanation, but it doesn't take long for him to realize there's something beyond normal there. The Horseman is exactly what you imagine, a relentless presence appearing out of nowhere and attacking anyone who crosses his path. At first, he seems like the classic villain, a violent entity, impossible to stop and completely out of control. But as Ichabod investigates further, one detail starts to stand out. The Horseman does not attack randomly. He follows a specific list of targets, and that's when everything changes. Ichabod discovers that someone is controlling the Horseman. The key to that is his head, which was stolen and used as a form of control. Whoever possesses that piece can command his actions. In other words, the real person responsible for the crimes is not the spirit itself, but whoever is using him as a tool. When the Horseman recovers his head, the story completely shifts. He stops being a weapon and starts acting on his own, ending the cycle of manipulation. Hidden Refuge. In Nightbreed, the story follows Boone, a man haunted by recurring nightmares about a place called Midian, a kind of refuge for creatures living hidden from society. Not knowing whether it's just imagination or something real, he decides to investigate and ends up finding exactly what he saw in his dreams, an underground world inhabited by deformed beings known as the Nightbreed. At first contact, everything points to danger. The creatures look terrifying, act aggressively, and make it clear they don't trust humans. Boone obviously thinks he ended up in the wrong place, but as he stays there, his perception begins to change. The Nightbreed are not monsters in the classic sense. They are survivors. They were rejected, hunted, and forced to live hidden to avoid being exterminated. The big twist comes when the real villain of the story starts acting. A psychiatrist named Decker, who had been manipulating Boone from the beginning, reveals himself as a killer who uses the existence of the Nightbreed as an excuse to justify his own crimes. He convinces the police that Midian is a threat and leads an invasion of the place. And then it becomes clear the monsters are not causing the chaos. They are trying to survive it. Even with their terrifying appearance, they are the only ones there who are not driven by cruelty or manipulation. The best friend. In Unfriended, everything happens on a computer screen where we follow Blair, a regular teenager who joins a video call with her friends after school. But there's one detail. It's exactly 1 year since a classmate of theirs, Laura Barnes, took her own life after a humiliating video went viral online. Light mood, right? But during the call, a strange user appears. Nobody invited them, nobody can remove them. And worse, this thing starts talking as if it were Laura. At first, it seems like just a heavy prank, but quickly the situation turns into a cruel game. The mysterious presence starts exposing secrets, private messages, betrayals, everything the group was hiding. And here's the key point. No one there is innocent. Everyone had some role, directly or indirectly, in what happened to Laura, including Blair, who acts like she's innocent, but hides a much worse secret than the others. What's most interesting is that the monster of the story is not exactly a classic villain. Laura did become a vengeful entity, yes, but once you find out what they did to her, your perspective changes. She's not attacking for fun. It's a reckoning, a twisted form of justice, but still a response to what happened. Secret in the house. In The People Under the Stairs, the story follows Fool, a boy who lives in a poor neighborhood and decides to take part in a robbery at the house of a rich couple known as Mommy and Daddy. The idea is simple. Get in, grab the money, and get out. But nothing there is normal. The house feels like a maze full of secret passages, hidden doors, and a completely disturbing atmosphere. During the break-in, Fool starts to realize something is very wrong in that place. Strange noises come from inside the walls. Doors lead to unexpected places, and the couple behaves completely detached from reality, treating everything like a twisted game. And then comes the discovery. There are people living hidden inside the house, children who have been locked in there over the years. At first, these residents seem like a threat. They behave aggressively, look disturbing, and live like wild creatures practicing cannibalism. But as the story unfolds, it becomes clear they are victims. The couple would adopt children, and when they didn't follow absurd rules, they were abandoned inside the walls, cut off from the world. Over time, they became what they are. In other words, the real monsters are not the ones hiding and acting like monsters, but the owners of the house.
Keep them real hungry.
The Glass Mansion. In 13 Ghosts, we meet Arthur, a father who has just lost his wife and is trying to start over with his kids. Out of nowhere, he inherits a bizarre mansion from an eccentric uncle. It seems like luck, but it clearly isn't. The house is made of glass, full of strange inscriptions and mechanisms that no one really understands. Soon after moving in, they discover that the place isn't just strange. It's a kind of machine, and the fuel for that machine is spirits. There are 12 ghosts trapped there, each with a terrifying appearance and a heavy past. At first, it seems like all of them are threats ready to attack at any moment. And yes, some of them are aggressive. But as the story progresses, it becomes clear they are not the real villains. The one behind everything is the uncle, Cyrus. He basically captured those entities over the years to activate a device that promises absolute power. In other words, the ghosts are not there by choice. They are being used. They are pieces of a bigger plan, and that completely changes the perception. Those terrifying spirits become almost victims of the situation. In fact, in the end, when they realize what's happening, they turn against Cyrus, not out of kindness, but because they are also trapped in that system. Total isolation. In The Lighthouse, the story follows two men isolated on a remote island, responsible for taking care of a lighthouse during a work period. On one side is Thomas Wake, the experienced veteran with a lot of strange rules. On the other, Ephraim Winslow, the quiet newcomer who takes the job without really knowing what he's getting into. The place is already uncomfortable by nature, but the real problem begins when the isolation starts affecting both of their minds. Their coexistence becomes more and more tense. Wake is authoritarian, controlling, and seems to be hiding several things, especially regarding the top of the lighthouse, which he does not allow Winslow to access. At the same time, Winslow starts having strange visions, hearing sounds that don't make sense, and losing his sense of reality. And in the middle of all that, almost supernatural elements begin to appear, like figures in the sea and presences that seem to be watching from afar. But the movie never presents a clear monster. What seems like an external threat could very well be the result of the characters' minds deteriorating. And that's where the point lies. The real horror does not come from a specific creature, but from the situation itself. The isolation, the guilt, and the constant tension create something far worse than any physical entity. In the end, the monster is not something that can be confronted directly. It's in the mind, in the environment, and in the dynamic between the two characters. So, can you think of any other horror movie monster that wasn't actually the villain? If so, drop it in the comments. On screen, there's a video where we show some scenes in horror movies that were so brutal they had to be removed. Click and watch it. See you there.